Welcome to Amintro Family, the podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Sammut. We hope you're enjoying the free online platform and community for family caregivers, be it through the Amintro Family app or amintrofamily.com, because it's all about helping those caring for their aging parents, relatives, or friends, and to connect, share experiences, and access valuable resources. Now, our guest today is Carla Velastegui, who became a teen caregiver years ago when her mother Gina was diagnosed with early-onset Parkinson's. Carla, we really appreciate your taking time for us today.
Hi, Jeff. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited to be able to join the conversation.
Yeah, we appreciate it. Now, and how far back are we going when talking about your mother getting her diagnosis?
So she got her diagnosis about 16 years now. And so back then I was in my early heading to my mid-teens. And she was in her mid-40s then at the time.
It must have been a shock for her to get her diagnosis.
Absolutely. I think it's something that not only because she was young for a Parkinson's diagnosis, but also it's just kind of a whole life change that gets thrown at you with a simple appointment of a diagnosis that we didn't expect. And all of a sudden, you know, it throws you out on a loop. Absolutely a shock.
Yeah, I'll bet. What were her early symptoms?
I mean, early on, her symptoms were really subtle. It started with a small limping that she had on her left side. She started having kind of difficulties being able to turn. I remember a big thing was she couldn't do kind of that blind spot turn that you do when you're driving. And then little changes like she had falls all of a sudden. And so I would say it was really subtle. And I think that was also part of why it took a few years to get an official diagnosis, because doctors didn't really kind of link into the fact that it could be young onset Parkinson's for her.
Oh, really? So it was quite a journey for her to get that diagnosis. I mean, as much as of a shock as the diagnosis would be, was there a part of you and, you know, with your dad and with your mother that you would feel, okay, at least now we know what we're dealing with?
I guess in a sense, yes. I mean, it took about 2 years or so for my mom to be able to get a diagnosis. You know, we were going from doctor to ER visits, and it was always kind of an answer of everything. All the results come back looking okay. There's nothing that's popping at us until we eventually got referred to a neurologist who saw her and who kind of right away was able to tell us this is young onset Parkinson's. And I think at that point, in a way, it did give us a sense of relief to know, okay, we know we know what's coming our way. We know we're not in this ambiguous search of what may be going on with my mom. But it was also, I think it go back to the previous kind of just comment that I made. It was still a shock. It was a diagnosis that gets thrown at you, and for us as a family, that diagnosis in a way was a diagnosis for all of us. It changed kind of so much for us, and for us it became, okay, how do we huddle together and how do we take on this diagnosis that now my mom is navigating?
You know, I think we've spoken to caregivers that have been caregiving for a wide variety of family members with various illnesses, but I don't think we've covered Parkinson's. So what would you say to someone that really has no idea what it's like for someone to caregive for a family member that has Parkinson's? What's something that one might not know about?
So I think something that people may not know about is that Parkinson's is more than just physical symptoms. It can impact everything from the cognitive side to mental health to physical health. And it's not just kind of what sometimes we think of stereotypically as someone having kind of the shakes, which is what you kind of hear it as a common word. But there's so much more behind it. And one person with Parkinson's is only one person that you've met with Parkinson's. The way that it shows up on different people is completely different. And everyone, the way that it progresses, the way that symptoms show up every day, the way that is managed is so different and so unique to every person. And so, one Parkinson's diagnosis, one person that you meet with Parkinson's is one type of Parkinson's, and it's a long journey. It's a chronic degenerative condition that I would say I've learned impacts almost every aspect of the person who is navigating living every day with the disease.
And the variousness of one who has Parkinson's to someone else who has Parkinson's, is that something that's explained to you very early on, or something that you kind of have to discover on your own?
I would say it is not explained, and I wish that when you get a diagnosis like Parkinson's or really any chronic degenerative condition, that providers in our healthcare system would provide you with more information or with a little bit of guidance. Even here is a website where you can go and read about this. And so it was not explained to us at all. It was something that we've learned over the years. We've been in this journey for about 16 years now. And we've learned through supporting my mom in her journey, but also through connecting with other people who have Parkinson's, with their caregivers, with support groups, with resources from the Parkinson's Foundation or Parkinson's Canada. It's something that we've learned as we go, just connecting with the Parkinson's community. And also I think realizing that I meet so many people that have a loved one who lived or is living with Parkinson's, and they share their experience and they share some of the challenges with me, or some of the ways that it was unexpected, and every time it's a different way that the condition shows up for every person. Yeah, completely different for everyone.
Well, that's a big reason why we do the show, is because communicating your shared experiences and what you've gone through, there often can't be a substitute for that. So, we always hope that there's somebody listening that's saying, geez, wow, that really hit home. I really appreciate Carla in this example, and for this episode, sharing her experiences. So what kind of mental and physical toll does being a caregiver to someone with Parkinson's take?
I mean, it can be overwhelming at times, absolutely. It can be isolating. And I think for any caregiver, anyone who's having to kind of step into that role of supporting someone navigating a condition, it can be a complete life change, and it can be overwhelming, it can be isolating, it can be lonely. I think in a way too, it can also be, I think, caregivers, why we show up for the people that we love is because we love them and we want to be there for them, and we want to be able to provide comfort and company and emotional support when someone that we know and that we care for is navigating the challenge of a condition. But I think, both type of emotions can coexist. You can have those really challenging emotions, and then you can also really appreciate that you have the ability and the privilege to be able to be there and to show up for that person. I say it's a roller coaster of emotions. It's a journey, really.
Yeah, and with that roller coaster and the down times, have there been times where you felt sorry for yourself, or maybe you felt some resentment at all for having to put your life on pause at times?
I think, as a long-time caregiver, I think it's, and as care needs progress and the condition progresses, you do take on additional responsibilities, kind of additional tasks that need to happen so that your loved one can continue to be living the best quality of life that they can. And of course, I think, and it's important to say aloud, it can be overwhelming, and it can be a lot. It's, I wouldn't necessarily say I've put my life on hold, but I've definitely have had to readjust and really change and be creative and open into what is my life look like while I'm able to pursue my interests in my career and my goals and personal milestones, but also in the way that I want to still continue to show up for my mom. And so for me, it's kind of finding that line, and I wouldn't say it's a balance because it's never a balance. I think it's always kind of an up and down, but it's finding a way for me to be able to still achieve those things that I personally really want to do, but also still show up for my mom in the way that I want to do. And so it's just, it might not be kind of living a traditional way of life, or I think for us it's just being creative, and it's being resourceful and adjusting to what the situation is bringing our way.
Well, you certainly were adjusting when you were a student. Like, was there a time where you had to just say, all right, I got to manipulate my course load, or I've got to take a semester off because I've got to work and save some money so that I can further my education? Didn't you have to do a lot of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think for me, just being giving caregiving has been a constant throughout much of my life, like my school years and my early career, and it continues to be a part of my life. It definitely required different priorities and a different focus than what other colleagues or other friends of mine were having to think about or experience at that time. And so when I think about school, for me, what that looked like, for example, was going to a school that was still relatively close to home so that I could still be reliable and come back and support my mom and be accessible in case there was an emergency. It also looked like, yes, adjusting my course load so that I knew I could show up for her. I knew that I could still manage and continue my education, but also support her in her needs. And so I think it's a lot of adjusting and shifting and trying to find the best ways. And unfortunately, our systems aren't always set up in the best ways to be able to support young caregivers who are trying to navigate that. And so a lot of times it's kind of you, as in I'm talking about myself, like the young caregiver, having to advocate, having to talk, having to kind of ask and find out what may be possible. And so for me, kind of as you shared, I at some point I had to take a semester off school to step back and to be able to work, to be able to save up and pay for a bit of my school, but also to be able to kind of step in and set up some of the better care that my mom needed. And it was very much kind of an ad hoc, kind of one-off conversation that I needed to have. And I often think about how much I wish back then that there had been better structure and supports in place for these conversations to happen that can actually support young caregivers.
So you're having conversations when you're in school, like you're telling professors or the schools, and then as you're in the workforce, you're telling employers, hey, this is my situation at home. Not like necessarily looking for any special treatment, but hey, this is something I'm dealing with. I'm going to need your support on this. Are you sharing all of that? Or are you saying, all right, you know what? I'll just suck it up. I'll do what I have to do. Nobody needs to know my business. I'm just going to do what I have to do. Like which was it? What did you do?
I mean, honestly, I would say it was a mix of both. So in school, it was a mix of kind of depending on the type of relationship I had with a professor or with an advisor, potentially sharing a little bit of my reality. And kind of coming prepared as to like what is the ask that I'm looking for. So how can I still show up reliably? How can I make sure that I'm kind of getting everything that I need to get done to be able to receive my degree, but also share a little bit of what is going on at home and how is a little bit different than what my peers were experiencing. And I would say it was also the same at work, especially early on in my career. I would often, not share this part of my life, mix of different factors. Some of them were I would often think, what can my employer do? This is just something I have to deal with personally. There is nothing that they can offer me. Another one was also a fear of repercussion. I think there was always...
You didn't do anything wrong?
I absolutely, I didn't do anything wrong, but
you felt that way?
I think it's a common feeling that a lot of caregivers that we experience because we're concerned that, by me sharing this personal responsibility that I take on outside of work, I may get passed on promotions, or I might not be seen as committed to my role as maybe my peer. And it's for me, it was I felt this way, and I talk to caregivers, and a lot of caregivers often feel this way, and so we just don't share. And oftentimes, with caregiving, there's also the load that we are also supporting our loved ones financially, and so we don't want to be able to risk or our way of making an income of supporting our loved ones by sharing this personal side. And I think the third part of that as well is also our workplaces and our management and even our policy aren't really set up in the best way currently to be able to support working caregivers. And so when there isn't really anything in place, it feels as a caregiver, it often feels like, well, why am I going to share? And you know, the employer, they may want to help you, but they don't know how to, and they don't have the right supports or the right policy. And so why share? For me, that changed in the past few years as I've grown in my career. I've started sharing. It's for me, it's a reality. It's a part of my day to day. I find it really hard to separate kind of my personal life and my work life. I come to work as my whole self, so now for me, it's important for me to share some of the realities, and also to be able to have those open conversations about what supports exist in the workplace, whether it's benefit, whether it's internal policies that can support me so that I can be successful and I know that I can deliver in the role that I'm taking on, but that I'm able to be supported in my caregiving responsibility, which is extremely important to me, just as my career is important to me. Caring for my mom is just as important. So it's been a change. It's taking a few years for me, but definitely now something that I look for, and I prompt conversations with employers around what supports do you have in place for caregivers.
Good. Well, and there should be a shift in thinking with employers, because if I were your employer and I were talking about you with, you know, maybe my superior or whatever, I would say, you know, Carla Velastegui, I didn't know how remarkable a person she was. On top of everything she's doing here, she's helping to take care of her mom. She's supporting her dad, who is a primary caregiver to her mother. This is a really special person. And we got to do everything we can to support this person, to get a piece of her, because she's really important. That's the quality person, the kind of quality worker we want to have here. That should be the mindset of an employer of a young caregiver, as far as I'm concerned.
I agree with you. I absolutely think there is, so many positives to having a caregiver in your teams, working for your company. Not only from the lens of the amount of skills that we develop as caregivers, we are amazing project managers. Our ability to be able to be resourceful, to be able to have that emotional intelligence of connecting with different people, being able to relate, they're just like empathy. There are just so many skill sets that we develop as caregivers. And from like when we look at it from a business case scenario as well, I often think about how much companies would be able to save if they had the right supports in place for caregivers. Attrition. If individuals feel supported and if they feel like their employer is able to help them get through a challenging health period of a loved one, loyalty will be there. And are want to also then be able to show up for our employer when they need that extra step of us to be able to perform and to be able to make sure that everything is successful for that company. I would also say, going back to really the cost of replacing someone who leaves, a lot of caregivers end up leaving the workplace because they feel like they cannot balance work and caring for the loved one at the same time, and like there's just no option. And so the cost of replacing that person is significant. It's huge. Whereas you could have implemented an employer, you can implement some supports in place, some benefits in place so that this person is able to navigate that period and then stay. And then so you're able to retain that knowledge, retain that expertise, and be able to also have that word of mouth of caregivers talking and saying, you know what, this company really supported me. I would recommend applying for them. I would vouch for them to be a caregiver-centric or caregiver-friendly workplace. So there's absolutely huge benefits. And then the other thing as well is, there is solely just in Ontario, there's 4 million caregivers, only in Ontario. In Canada, I'm going to butcher this number, and actually I'm getting the Canada and the US numbers confused. But the focus that I'm trying to say here is caregivers are everywhere in our society. And so actually businesses are doing themselves a favor and staying behind and not being competitive if they're not looking to set up caregiver-friendly practices internally, because at any level of seniority, at any level of a career, someone will be a caregiver.
Yeah, that's right. And they are quality people that need to be retained and supported. in any way, shape, or form. So, was it your mother's diagnosis that prompted your career in digital health working?
It did. It
Yeah.
absolutely did. I was navigating the healthcare system with my mom so young, and kind of seeing a lot of the issues that were happening in healthcare, especially in chronic disease management. And then for me was that idea of how can we use technology to make it more accessible, to make it more equitable, to make it a little bit easier. I think as a healthcare system, one can only go so far with like a human resource. But I think with technology, we're able to actually scale a little bit better in some ways, when done ethically and when done right. And so it absolutely inspired me wanting to work in healthcare, me wanting to work with companies that were using technology to make healthcare better.
Yeah. So, how are you personally using technology to help you as a caregiver?
I use it in multiple ways. Some of them are kind of a low tech thing. So, for example, like a light motion sensor. That's a very low tech item, a gadget, you could call it, that we use. Like Google Home, things like kind of electronic boards that my mom and I used to kind of connect with each other. Those are kind of, in a way, low tech things that you plug in, you do a quick setup, and you go. But there are larger things that we use. So, for example, with my mom, we use AirTags, and we've had those conversations as to what does this look like? What does it this entail for me to be able to have access and to know where you are, and kind of having those conversations around privacy and also respecting her autonomy. And then we also use technology in the way that we track a lot of the progression of her condition. And so we have spreadsheets, we have kind of documents, we have, I guess, a folder of my mom's name is Gina. So
Yeah.
Gina's Care, where we track a lot of information, which then in turn we use to be able to have conversations with our providers. So when we go for the specialist appointments, we are able to come with data on my mom that can then help us shape the decisions that her providers think are best for her for the next step. The other one that I will include in here as well is also AI. AI has become a game changer for the way that I'm able to support my mom in her everyday, from being able to translate medical information to being able to get supports to be able to have certain types of conversations with her or with loved ones that care for her, to being able to summarize a lot of the data that we collect on my mom's care to then be able to bring it to a provider, to setting up like auto reminders. It's become very like central and extremely helpful to my mom's care. So those are some of the kind of technologies that we use, and then of course tools and apps that we use on our phone or an iPad, and even tools that we use to like assistive communication devices that we use so that we can make sure that we are understanding my mom and we understand everything that she needs when there are challenging days that she can't fully kind of verbalize everything.
Mm.
So I would say it's technology is assisting me as a caregiver. There's so much potential there, and I think it can really be used to augment our ability to care, and it can use to technology can really, in a way, remove a lot of kind of the daily tasks to then allow us to get a little bit more time for ourselves for self-care, but also to allow us to focus more on the person in front of us and not necessarily on like creating a reminder to fill up the pharmacy prescription, or sitting in front of a computer and going through all this information that we've collected, or even reading a book, an entire book of how to navigate anxiety attacks and Parkinson's, but actually now I can just use AI to be able to get the quick prompts and tips and ways that then I can interact with my mom to help her navigate an episode.
Yeah, and then you're spending more time with your mom as a result. We've barely talked about your dad. We've mentioned him. You've stepped up and you've helped financially speaking in the household. You've contributed that way, but of course, as a caregiver and supporting your dad as he's the primary caregiver for your mother. How is your dad in all of this? And what's that team like between you and your dad in caregiving for your mom?
Yeah, I mean, it's I shifted over the years. When my mom first got diagnosed, she was still working full time for up to a period, and when until she could no longer work safely. And when she had to step back, my dad became the primary provider, the sole provider of the household. And so during that period, my focus was really in kind of being more of the everyday caregiver for my mom, accompanying her to appointments, driving, picking up the meds, kind of all the daytime activities that needed to happen for her care. And then kind of he would get home and kind of he would support with any activities that he could in the evenings. And it's definitely shifted. It ups and flows as my career changed or as I went through personal changes where eventually we decided it was best for him to retire early, so that he could really step in and support a lot more of my mom's day-to-day care. And so I mean, I think it's very challenging for him as well, to kind of support a loved one through a condition that can be so ever-changing and degenerative. And we try to manage. I would say it's hard to care for a loved one in a family, and everyone has their different ways of caring and of showing up. And so it's taking some time for us to figure out what are the best qualities that each one of us brings, that contributes to the circle of care for my mom, and what are the things that we're really good at and that we can show up really well on, and what are the things that maybe we have to step back and ask for help from the other person. So it's an ebb and flow. I would say it's a team. We know ultimately our priority is to keep my mom at home. That has been her goal and our goal. And so how do we kind of shift and move things around and support each other so that we can make that a reality?
Have you figured out how to make sure you're taking care of yourself? And how are you best able to communicate with others what you need from them as a caregiver?
It's taking some time, to be honest,
Yeah.
transparently. There were definitely periods when I burnt out, when it was too much with work and life and caring for a loved one and trying to care for myself. And I think especially during COVID, it was a period where I crashed, and I realized my well-being is just as important as my mom's well-being. If I'm not doing well physically or emotionally or mentally, then I'm not able to show up for her in the ways that I want to, in the ways that I need to show up for her care. And so, in a way, it was a forced reminder to step back and realize, okay, what do I need for my emotional health? And for me, that was therapy. Therapy has become a core part of my self-care. And kind of what other activities really fill that like mental health side. And so for me, it's hiking, it's trying to be outdoors, trying to find communities or groups that kind of bring joy and bring activity into the outdoors. For my physical health has been kind of like the hiking or trying to find periods of movement throughout my day. And my physical health also now entails making sure that I go to the doctor, that I follow up on those things that I need to do, whether it's a blood work or an exam, that I don't just kind of push that paper aside, but that my health is just as important. And it's taking time. And I think it's challenging for caregivers to, want to pause and prioritize ourselves for a period because we know that there's so much to do and we want to show up for a loved one. But it doesn't benefit anyone when we're not healthy and we can't show up in the way. And so it's been a journey for me, and it's still a journey of trying to find the time and those activities that allow me to care for myself, but also not having feelings of guiltiness, or are kind of feeling like that's not a priority. So it's a balance, but I think as caregivers, it's extremely important that we also realize our self-care is just as important.
Yeah, it's very good to hear that you're aware of that, because not a lot of people are. I could do a better job. of that. I'm always about everybody else first, and then you get burned out and you go, well, what good is this? This is not the version of me that's going to be most helpful to everybody else. And isn't that what I want to have at the end of the day? So you're involved with the Parkinson's Foundation and caregiving organizations in Canada. What does it do for you knowing that you're actively advocating as you are? Like, does it give you some kind of sense of control where life can be out of control?
I, I don't know if it's a sense of control. I think for me, it's more of a sense of purpose and meaning. It's something that the more I've shared my caregiving journey, the more I realize, and the more people come, and it could be from friends or colleagues or people that I just meet, that they share their caregiving journey and they share some of the challenges and some of the beautiful experiences that they went through. And it's so, caregiving is deeply personal, but it's also systematic. And so for me, being able to volunteer and support these organizations and kind of put my time to actively advocate for Parkinson's, for caregivers, and for the inclusion of patients in the designing of our systems, gives me meaning to want to make it better for other people. I recognize how many privileges I have in caring for my mom and in helping her support navigating the healthcare system, from language fluency to knowledge of the healthcare system to financial stability to flexible time. And that's just not, those are privileges that not everyone has in Canada or the US. And so if I have the ability to be able to use my voice, to be able to advocate and use my experience, whatever part of it, or my skill set, to help and make it better for other people, then I'm going to do it. Because caregiving is here. Chronic long-term conditions, degenerative conditions like Parkinson's are happening and are only going to increase. And more people are going to be using a healthcare system. And so for me, it's how can I make it better in a way so that individuals that are going through this are not feeling maybe as overwhelmed, or feel like there is somewhere that they can turn for resources or help. And I think the other part of it as well is also community. It's giving me a sense of community. I've met some wonderful folks in all the organizations that I support that are just amazing. And being able to connect with them, being able to share parts of my journey with them, and also listen to their journey and connect with them on such a personal level has been very unique from this. And it's something that I very much treasure, and that it's part of my self-care, part of my mental self-care.
I think it's amazing that uh, you become a young caregiver, and that has done so much to define your life and who you are as a person as well. And in helping your mother and helping your father as a primary caregiver, you end up helping so many other people as well. I think you're a great example of how caregiving has helped to define you, and has really propelled you to dedicate so much of your life to helping other people. So, in that vein, I'll ask you this on the way out. What advice might you have to a family who has a loved one newly diagnosed with Parkinson's?
I would say is, first of all, take a breath. When we get a diagnosis, the first thing we often do is go on Google and search Parkinson's, and then we are overloaded by a wave of information, and not all reliable, maybe not all applicable to us at that point. And so take a breath and find organizations that are trustable, that are have the resources to guide you and provide some sort of support in this new journey that you're navigating. And so organization that I love and has tons of information is the Parkinson's Foundation. They are a great organization to be able to go read information, reach out to their help team. And so I say it's read and inform yourself. Also, start having conversations early. So what does a diagnosis, a Parkinson's diagnosis look like for you as a family? what are things that may need to change or shift? What are things that you may need to start thinking about and planning? So when you think long term, it might be downsizing, it might be talking about finances, it might be talking about future planning. These are really challenging conversations to have, and you don't need to find a solution and kind of a clear path from day one, but starting to have these open conversations as to it's here, it's happening. How do we start getting ourselves organized for this? The other thing too, I would say, is find community, find other people, support groups, or others around you that have gone through something similar or going through this, because it's so much comes at you, and it's a little bit more manageable when you have others to navigate it with, or who can give you advice or tips or connect you to something or someone that may be able to guide you. I think a last one that I would say is also give yourself grace. A Parkinson's diagnosis impacts and changes so much. Oftentimes we are thrown at this without having any sort of prep or support in place. And so you're going through this for the first time. And so give yourself grace, give yourself empathy as you navigate the feelings that come with it, as you navigate the physical changes that come with Parkinson's, but also as you navigate the uncertainty that will be coming to you. So self-empathy and self-grace, I think, are extremely important. And actually, one last one that I think is also very, very important is also respect the autonomy and the dignity of the person that you're supporting and that you're helping care for. I think sometimes we get so lost in these medical conversations and kind of everything that has to happen around it, but the person that you love, or the family member, or the person that you're helping care for is still there. And so don't rush, and maybe always step back and ask, like, what is important to you, to that person? How can we find a medium between keeping your autonomy, your dignity, but also your safety? What are your goals? What is that person's, what are those person's priorities, and what is their definition of quality of life, and how do we as a caregiver facilitate that? So those would be my recommendations. And I will share, it took me years to get to a point for me to be able to reflect on this and to still find a way to navigate this. And so don't put the pressure on yourself that, it'll be a week and I'll have everything figured out. It's been years for me.
Well, I have no doubt that you saved some of our listeners a lot of time and energy in their caregiving journey by sharing yours. Carla Velastegui, keep up the great work, both personally and professionally. Our best to Gina, your mother, and to your father as well. Carla, we really appreciate this. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Jeff. This was wonderful.
Thank you.
I'm so glad I could be a part of it.
Of course, it was great to have you. Thank you. I'm Jeff Sammut. This has been another episode of Amintro Family, the podcast, which you can hear on the Amintro Family app and wherever you listen to podcasts. Check out amintrofamily.com. And a reminder, we want to hear your stories on the forum as well, and we can share them here on Amintro Family, the podcast.